Hello.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Conspiracy Crunch once again.
We're back.
Yeah, this is episode 3, and you'll notice that we're back up to our full numbers this week. We're back up to our full strength, which is good because Abby is back.
Hello.
Yeah, of course, last week she was sadly ill, but thankfully we're back up to full numbers this week, and we can crack on with
indeed.
2 great new theories for you. If you missed last week, the theories we covered were the Lost City of Atlantis and the Rahonk Codex. So they were 2 really interesting ones.
Yeah,
if you
they
did miss that show, then it is now up on YouTube, along with episode 1, which is on the Philadelphia experiment. Both of those are available on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, which is of course called The Conspiracy Crunch, much like the show, and also the Facebook page.
And don't forget the Twitter as well.
The Twitter as well, definitely.
So obviously all missed my lovely voice, so I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, we are glad you're back.
Hey.
It's doing a 1-hour speech show by yourself is horrendously difficult.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Oh God, it was terrible. Like my mouth was so dry by the end of that. But yeah, back up to full numbers, so it's not a problem now. And this week we have 2 great new conspiracy theories for you. The first half today we'll be looking at Kapustin Yar, which is also known as the Russian Roswell or the Russian Area 51. We'll go into more detail on that in just a second. And the second half of the show today is on the secret Sphinx room, which is allegedly a small room underneath the Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Yeah. Okay.
Shall be fun to get into. Well,
Yeah.
We're going to start with the
Kapustin Yar.
Kapustin Yar. I can't
Yeah.
say that. This is going to be
So
interesting.
there's lots of nice long Russian names for you to pronounce in this
Kapustin,
half as well. So
There we
you're
go,
going to
got
have
it.
great fun with this.
Oh, yay.
Right. So Kapustin Yar is a top secret military base in Russia. It's still working now, and it was built in 1946 under direct orders from Joseph Stalin himself. At the time of its establishment, Kapustin Yar was the biggest and most sophisticated rocket test site in Russia and arguably in all of Europe. It was also Russia's first space range, and a number of high-profile, groundbreaking space operations were conducted from this base.
So its official purpose for being established was to test captured rockets from Nazi Germany after the collapse and the conclusion of World War II. When its 80-plus years of existence, other stories and testimonies have come forward, suggesting it has a hidden purpose. These stories have led people to refer Kapustin Yar as the Russian Area 51 and the Russian Roswell.
Yeah, conspiracy theorists, claim that this is a site of several reverse-engineered spacecraft that either crashed or were shot down over Russian territory. Most of the Soviet Union's Cold War technology and weaponry, such as cruise missiles, satellites, submarine torpedoes and rockets, were all developed here. Kapustin Yar was most famously where Russia's first nuclear bomb was partly constructed.
So we do have some big questions that are going to come about from what we're going to explain to you.
Yeah.
So where do these claims come from? Is there any evidence to support them?
Yeah.
Was the Soviet Union using alien wreckages to enhance their space programs and missile technology?
Yeah, that is a big question, really. That sort of links into the evidence a little bit, I think, because we can sort of because that's like the big alien technology argument, isn't it? It's like, look how far mobile technology's come in the last 25 years and sort of stuff like that.
It's really developed.
But this is the theories of Kapustin Yar are deep set into Russian history. They're not new. They have been around for hundreds, even thousands of years in some cases. So we're going to look at some famous historic UFO cases in Russia. Initially, this is going to seem like a bit of a tangent, but bear with us because it will loop back round to the main point. So, get that out of the way.
Yeah.
So, the first one we're going to look at happened in roughly 950 AD. So, UFO sightings in Russia can be dated back as far as 950 AD. Locals will report seeing aerial battles on a frequent basis in some areas of Russia. In the 17th century, there are a number of UFO sightings in Russia, with witnesses describing them as comet-shaped balls of fire, which links us on to the second one.
So this one's from the 15th of August, 1663. So there's a famous eyewitness account, quotes, "On this, the 15th day of August in the year 1663, who'd have thunk it, a great crash sounded out from the heavens. Around the stroke of midday there descended upon Lake Zero a ball of fire from the clearest of skies. In front of the fire, there were two fiery beams that from south to the west and was about 500 meters away when it vanished. But once again, everything at every turn staying over Lake Zero 1 hour and a half, filling all those who saw it with great dread. So stories like this were apparently common throughout pre-revolutionary Russia.
Yeah. One thing that I haven't put on the notes about that is that claim continues on to say that fishermen on Lake Zero were actually scalded by the heat of the water.
Oh.
And then fish even jumped out of the lake onto land to avoid it. And some of them were even glowing, apparently.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a really interesting story. And you
Yeah,
think
I can
like
imagine.
1663, there's sort of no real motivation to hoax a UFO
No, there
thing.
wouldn't be.
UFOs hadn't really been considered in like its own entity at that point. It's not
That's some
until
crazy
Roswell
stuff.
it's not until like Roswell and World War II that UFOs became like a predominant part of culture and
Yeah.
research, I'd suggest. Our next case, we're starting to get a bit more modern now. This is quite a short one, but on 17th of March 1892, an eyewitness account of a UFO was published in the Russian newspaper Sphinx. A pillar of light was pointed straight down to the earth, forming a cone-shaped bundle of rays in the colour of ordinary flame. The stammer's
got
not
this.
in the quote, don't worry. The brightness was considerable and can sometimes be compared to the brightness of an electric street lamp. The point from which the rays originated did not move during the whole time. The rays are visible for 20 to 25 minutes. So that's quite a short one. That's another eyewitness
Yeah.
account that was in the newspaper Sphinx. And again, that's another pre-revolutionary Russia one. And now
That's pretty cool.
let's go to the next one.
So the next one, oh, you got big words for me.
This is the
Tickle-
Tunguska incident.
Tunguska. So this is the Tunguska incident from 13th of June 1908. So the Siberian forest of Tunguska was almost entirely flattened by an enormous explosion. Could be heard and felt as far... You really haven't done well with these notes. As
Oh,
far
yeah,
away
as
as Western Europe.
Yeah.
The explosion had the equivalent power of a 40 megaton hydrogen bomb. Theories say that it could have been a huge meteor crashing to Earth, but skeptics and some research suggests otherwise. So one of the observations that derails the meteor conclusion is the fact there were no craters discovered around or in Tunguska. The reports of the crashing objects also show rational guided flight, of which, of course, a meteor would not be capable of. Former aide for Soviet Union leader Nikita Khrushchev,
Yeah.
Sergei Khrushchev, said in an interview that one of the possibilities we have to consider is that this was not caused by a comet, but from the crash of a UFO. So even Joseph Stalin himself said he thought the cause of the explosion was a UFO launching some kind of experimental weapon.
Yeah, this is really interesting because you've got the quote of Sergei Khrushchev himself, who was a high-ranking official for both Joseph Stalin and later Nikita Khrushchev, and he himself has gone on record saying that, which is really interesting, that he himself has gone on record suggesting that even he believes it was caused by a UFO, which I feel like governing powers in the West wouldn't quite come forward with that sort of thing.
I don't think they would.
Sort of the big example of that is Area 51's ongoings,
Yeah.
and also the Roswell crash as well. So, and then this next one it's going to realise why we've done all of this now, and it's going to loop into this example, which is the 19th of June 1948, so almost exactly 40 years after the Tunguska incident. We had, according to reports, Kapustin Yar, which had been built at this point in 1946. Kapustin Yar's air traffic controller sees a strange unidentified object appear on radar. Instinctively, Russian fighter jets are scrambled to intercept it. However, at the same time, a MiG-21 pilot who is already airborne about 10 kilometers away from the base sees a cigar-shaped craft in the air in front of him, performing impossible maneuvers such as rotating on the spot and pivoting without a turning circle. Obviously, these are impossible. Planes have like forward momentum on them, so they can't pivot on the spot.
Yeah. They have things in place to stop them from being able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And his report back to the base said that he was, and I quote, being blinded by a bright light. Former Soviet Union officer Vitaly Pravdistev went on record years later saying that pilot was told to pursue craft and did so for 3 minutes. But when he actually attempted to engage the object, it came with dire consequences. The pilot was blinded by extreme rays of light coming from the craft, people have speculated this is some kind of particle weapon that belonged to the UFO.
I can imagine so.
Yeah, but in retaliation to this, the MiG-21 pilot fired a missile which was able to bring the object down. Both the MiG-21 plane and the UFO crashed, leaving no survivors. This did not make the news, unlike the Roswell crash a year earlier. It was over Russia's most top secret and sensitive airbase. Also, freedom of press wasn't quite as readily available in the Soviet Union as it was in America. So the government suppressed the story and ensured media didn't get hold of it. The Soviet military retrieval team took the remains of the spacecraft to Kapustin Yar, and the Russian UFO program begins. Following this crash, the Soviet government authorized a shoot-to-kill policy on UFOs, and MiG-21 pilots were instructed to do whatever they could to take the UFOs down, even if it included bringing their own plane down in the process. This apparently caused fighter pilots to engage in dogfights with UFOs over Kapustin Yar.
That's kind of terrifying, being
It
ordered
is.
to bring your own plane down if you don't know what it
Yeah,
is.
as if seeing a spacecraft isn't bad enough, you're then
Yeah.
told to shoot at it.
And if it comes to it, bring your own plane down, possibly crashing and stuff not going well, that'd be terrifying.
Yeah, it would be very it would be very sort of a bit surreal would be the word I'd describe for
Yeah.
that. But then we were talking about the dogfights over Kapustin Yar. We will come back onto that later because there's a very significant woman in the history of the Soviet Union who will actually testify to this, which is really interesting. But before we get on to that, we're going to talk about how the MiG pilot was able to take the UFO down. Because by our understanding, or what we seem to believe, is that UFOs use a anti-gravity envelope in order to fly. Obviously, we can't confirm this because we've never officially caught a UFO.
We haven't, indeed.
I mean, until one lands in my back garden, I'm not really going to know how they work.
Oh, yeah, that one's definitely going to land in the back garden.
Yeah, oh, well, who knows? It might.
Fingers
it might.
crossed.
Right.
So,
yeah, this theory suggests how UFOs are able to perform such evasive and impossible maneuvers when they're in the air, and also how they can travel through space at such speeds. The theory suggests that when a UFO enters an atmosphere, it counters the air resistance by creating a field of anti-gravity around it. It does this by creating a vacuum in front of it so the air resistance doesn't reach the aircraft. Like we mentioned in the Philadelphia experiment episode, you can imagine space as layers. By creating this envelope, the UFO is pushing a gap in between these layers, meaning it can move between them.
that does sound fun, though. Imagine being able to do that.
Yeah, and it would be incredible if we could mimic this for our own technology, but this allows it to stop dead without the need for a braking distance or deceleration, while also being able to reach incredible speeds. This is one of the concepts that is allegedly tested on crashed UFOs at Kapustin Yar, and the theory of anti-gravity envelope, do you know who that was without looking at the notes?
No.
Yeah, it was our good friend who we are going to do a full episode on in future, the man and the myth, Bob Lazar.
Ooh.
The man
This
who
shall be
claimed that he
interesting.
was a scientist at Area 51 who reverse-engineered spacecraft. And he also declared the existence of an antimatter element before we had officially discovered it.
Nice.
So he's a very interesting man. And
Yeah, definitely one to look
the theory,
into.
Yeah, the first public scientific perspective of this theory was brought forward by him. So breaking and disrupting this anti-gravity field with the missile is how the MiG-21 is supposed to have been able to bring the spacecraft down in that dogfight in 1948.
So next we're going to cover some important people and places to do with this theory, conspiracy rather. So the first one being Joseph Stalin.
I mean, you can't talk about the Soviet Union without mentioning Joseph
You can't.
Stalin.
It's going to come up at some point. So he was heavily invested in the idea of capturing technology from UFOs and reverse engineering it so the Soviet Union could use this technology to its advantage. He employed the USSR's top scientists to extract all the information they could on Russia's history with UFOs and apply it to any crashed spaceships that they acquired. One of these scientists, Sergei Korolev, would later go on to be the head of operations for Russia's Sputnik program. So they were incredibly important and respected figures.
Yeah, of course, Sputnik was the first man-made satellite to go into orbit around Earth. So he's a very respected and very significant figure in astronomy.
So Stalin wanted to find fragments of the ship from the Tunguska crash site and use them to reconstruct the craft's so the Soviet Union could utilize the technology to its military advantage. I will get there saying that name right.
Tunguska. I mean, it only comes up a couple more times, so you should be all right.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we mentioned the famous Sergei Korolev. Anyone that's into the history of space travel will probably recognise that name. But Sergei Korolev used his own money to fund an expedition to the Tunguska crash site decades later during Stalin's rule, and saw that most of the scars from the crash were still present. His team also found radioactive metallic fragments still embedded into the ground. This goes against the idea that it was a meteor, because a meteor wouldn't come down with that level of radiation.
It really wouldn't.
No. So the debris was not like anything that had been found on a meteor or asteroid before as well. This also leads into an area nearby called the Devil's Graveyard. This is a big part of the Kapustin Yar theory. This is a 300-metre square area where no plants grow and all animals that walk through it die. Yeah, you can see why it's called the Devil's Graveyard.
Yeah, you can indeed.
But yeah, it also has an active radioactivity level. Theorists suggest that this is caused by a radioactive fragment from the crash that is still buried there. This is where Kapustin Yar comes in, though, because this is where the radioactive fragments were believed to be taken after they were recovered from the crash site. So talking about the Devil's Graveyard, we will have a similar case a bit later on in the show. So keep that in mind. There is a similar thing coming up a bit later.
That is interesting, though.
Yeah.
That everything walking through it doesn't survive.
Yeah, it's sort of the radiation levels contribute
morbid
to that.
Yet cool.
Yeah, it's sort of it's one of those like morbidly unexplained things, isn't it? Yeah.
So another one would be spy reports. So an American spy working at Kapustin Yar during the 1950s said the following in his official report: an unidentified object is on each launch pad. Yeah,
that's I mean, obviously that doesn't mean they're spacecraft. Unidentified just means it doesn't recognise it. It could be a new kind of spy plane. It could be sort of a new kind of tank or something. They were working on rockets there as well. Maybe it was like a new kind of nuclear warhead they had developed. But unidentified object, it's not a open closed case in that sense, is it?
No, it just means they don't know what it is, which is understandable since he's a spy.
Yeah, and also the Soviet Union in the early 1950s were coming out with all sorts of crazy technology for the time. And going to move on to our next big personality, who is Anton Anvilov. This Russian UFO expert interpreted pictures taken by the U-2 spy plane in the early 1950s and detailed that a quarter-mile below the base is a secret area where the dimly lit halls lead to dingy rooms filled with exotic technology being taken apart and put back together. There was also a hub reserved to perform autopsies on alien bodies recovered from crash sites. At the end of the underground base is a hangar that has a handful of long cigar-shaped silver aircraft in various stages of being dismantled or repaired. Of course, that one is a lot more... That one's not quite as open to interpretation as our spy report. That one's... It's very out there. It's very out there. I mean, it's sort of the claims are sort of performing post-mortems and autopsies on alien bodies.
Yeah,
is crazy.
It is.
It's a huge, huge claim. But
insane.
Yeah. Well, maybe not. If it's not insane, if he's
true.
right. But yeah, we will go into that later.
So the next part is ground patterns. A number of strange patterns were drawn onto the ground around Kapustin Yar and were first seen by the U-2 spy planes images taken in the 1950s. Conspiracy theorists claim that these patterns were strategically placed by Korolev and Stalin to attract UFOs to the area, which they could then be shot down and used for experiments and reverse engineering. This idea may have been borrowed from ancient civilizations such as ancient Egypt, which also has strong conspiracy ties to aliens.
Which conveniently ties into the second half of the show today with the Sphinx room, which is quite convenient. I didn't realise that the ancient Egypt thing had a link to Kapustin Yar's layout until I was doing the research. I was like, oh, that's worked out pretty well.
But it makes the show run a lot smoother.
Yeah, it does, definitely.
So,
and I mentioned, actually, you can do this one.
Yeah, but, I don't want to try and pronounce the next name.
No, it's, but yeah, basically, I mentioned that there was a very significant woman in the history of Soviet aircraft. This woman, her name is Marina Popovich.
So she's one of Russia's most celebrated MiG-21 test pilots who achieved the rank of colonel and served for almost 20 years. She gave direct accounts saying that she saw dogfights between the MiG-21 pilots and UFOs on several occasions. On a military mission in 1980, she said that she encountered multiple UFOs. She saw 3 bright fireballs in the shape of a triangle.
Again, we've got a growing theme here.
Yeah,
you might notice
the fireballs coming up.
Yeah, big fireballs, which dates back even to that claim in the 1600s.
Yeah.
Was talking about big fireballs over
like
Russia.
One of them videos that was running around on the internet, like end of 2010-ish, of when the fireball's going over Russia. This guy was driving down the road.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. There's also one from...
Seems like a running...
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but I think it was early 2010s or late 2000s.
Yeah.
There was one over a Chinese airport, which actually caused the airport to close while they were investigating it. I'm not sure if the footage of that is still on YouTube because, China.
Yeah.
But
China.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm not sure if that's still on YouTube, but if it is, I recommend you check that out. Just type in Chinese airport UFO, and it should come up maybe. But yeah, it is interesting. It is just like a big ball of fire with like a trail behind it. It is really interesting to look at. And the last figure we are gonna look at.
This is the one I did not want to try and pronounce.
Yeah, this is a man called Vladimir Azharzha, which is that's not how it's spelled. It's spelled Aiaia. So you can imagine. I had to look up a documentary about him and how they pronounced it in order to know that I was actually saying it right. Because I was gonna go with Aiaia was gonna be my guess, but it's Vladimir Azharzha is the name of this man. And he's the pivotal figure in Russian ufology, like a really famous person.
Yeah.
To the point where in the field, towards the end of his career, he was simply just known as Azharzha because he was so well known that people didn't need to bother with his surname. His first name even.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
That is his surname.
Yeah. So this man was a Russian theorist who said that there is a subterranean storage base under Kapustin Yar, which exists solely for the testing of crash UFOs and also carrying out post-mortem operations on their pilots. So this links back into the claims from Anton Anvalov about him saying that there was, of course, post-mortem operations going on aliens at the time, and also you had those hangars full of the cigar-shaped UFOs. Vladimir Azharzha does accept these claims, and he supports them as well, which is... It adds a lot of strength to it, I think.
Yeah, it does, with him saying it, with him being such a pivotal figure.
Yeah, because like the difference between a source and a claim is a source is more than one person says it. A claim could just be anything.
Yeah.
I could claim that the sky is green, but it isn't, obviously. And
I mean, to
obviously,
colourblind people it might be.
Yeah,
you never
maybe.
know.
But yeah, if I was to say the sky is green, that's just a claim.
Yeah.
Whereas if 10 other people went, oh no, actually it's blue, that's a source.
Yeah.
Like, that's a bad example, but...
I mean, it works.
Yeah.
It's a simple one so people understand it better.
Yeah. So back to Mr. Azharzha. In 2005, so this is quite recent now, he invited the History Channel to film an alleged UFO crash site near the original crash site of the so-called Russian Roswell in 1948. Using 2 copper rods, Azharzha began to map out the shape of a cigar in a small grassy valley, which is roughly 100 foot by 20 foot in size. The UFO reportedly crashed there in 1961. And here are some of the quotes that he said during this while he was carrying out the test. First of all, he said right here was the crash site for a flying saucer. So that's quite a big one.
That is a big claim right off the bat.
But that can be backed up later on. We'll come back onto that one. But he says animals avoid this place and they go around it. Cattle won't graze here. Again, much like the Devil's Graveyard. We're seeing another theme come up here of like this consistency that gives conspiracy theories their body, really, not the claims. And then there is an energy here that affects people in a negative fashion. Your pulse changes, you begin to sweat, your breathing patterns change. Again, that was all true because the history cameramen reported that they experienced that while they were there, which is fascinating. And then at the end of the interview, Azharzha tells the camera crew to leave because they had been exposed to the energy of the crash site for too long. And then a local person who lives 200 yards from the crash site said that she actually witnessed the crash in 1961, describing it as, guess what, a big fiery red sphere.
So the fireballs are back and it all continues through.
As recent as 1961. Or
That is
1980 even, as
Yeah.
Popolov said.
So there is potential evidence of this UFO tech being used, which we're going to go through. So before 1948, Russia's rocket technology was not hugely advanced. They only had early basic versions of missiles and had only just created their first nuclear bomb. However, following 1948, they were successful in the following missions. So the Russians reportedly made more progress in 18 months for creating nuclear weapons and methods for delivering them than had been anticipated for 5 years.
Yeah.
This was said by Stanton Friedman,
Yeah.
who is a quantum physicist and ufologist.
Yeah, that was from the same documentary that Jar Jar did his demonstration in 2005. I mean, that was quite near the end, but yeah, he said that Russia had made staggering progress with their rocket technology in such a short space of time.
Like in 18 months instead of over 5 years.
Yeah,
which was
half a
predicted.
decade's worth of work in less than 2 years.
That is
Stunning.
crazy.
Yeah.
They were also very successful with the Sputnik satellite launch.
Yeah, which you mentioned earlier, the first man-made satellite to orbit Earth.
It's still up there, isn't it? I don't know.
I don't know, actually. I'm not sure.
We might
Maybe.
find out later.
Yeah.
There was also the first animal in space.
Yeah.
And
Dog.
yeah, and the first manned flight to orbit the Earth,
Yeah.
which was some pretty big missions
Yeah,
to be
I'm
successful.
quite sure they had the first woman in space as well, but I'm not 100% on
believe
that.
they did.
Yeah, I didn't put it in the notes because I'm not sure if it's true or not. But yeah, I'm not sure Sputnik's still in orbit either. There is actually, you know, there's a little Easter egg in the film WALL-E for Sputnik.
Oh,
You know, when he goes out of orbit on the back of the rocket and that satellite hits him in the face,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Sputnik that's stuck to his face.
Oh, I never noticed that.
Yeah, that's Sputnik. That's
That is
that
pretty
little
cool.
reference. Yeah, I really like that. I didn't realise it was at the time when it came out in 2009. I was like 11.
Yeah,
so I
so
didn't
you
really
just think,
know.
oh, it's
yeah,
just...
It's only after I watched it a few years later I was like, oh, that's Sputnik. But yeah, sort of nice little
Nice.
pop trivia for you there on
There
Sputnik.
you go.
But as a result of all this, Kapustin Yar was at the top of the US military spying list at the beginning of the 1950s. And the first mission for America's U-2 spy plane, we mentioned the spy plane pictures earlier in the show.
Yeah.
The first ever mission for the U-2 spy plane, which was at the time the most sophisticated spy plane in the world, was to Kapustin Yar.
Which is understandable since of how, like, up there it was in priority.
Yeah,
You'd want to know about that place.
yeah, yeah.
What was
and-
going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's not... This is going to sound stupid, but I don't think it's actually that far-fetched to consider that Russia has a base like this.
No.
You look at the size of Russia.
Oh,
if
yeah,
if
they
a UFO is
definitely...
going to crash anywhere, it's either going to be in the sea or in Russia.
Yeah, there is a pretty big chance of that
Yeah.
happening.
It is, if it's going to crash on land, it's probably happening in Russia. And they're probably going to find it.
Oh, yeah, they're going to find it. They are going to experiment.
Yeah.
And they are going to use that technology.
Yeah, and then
That's
of
just
course,
Russia.
yeah, and then of course this and now Russia, despite the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, Russia is still one of the biggest military powers in the world. It's still one of the leading technologies in terms of military tech and
Yeah.
also spyware too. It is still one of the predominant nations in the country, and people say this is still because of stuff that they had recovered from the Russian Roswell in 1948.
Yeah, it's understandable with how big
Yeah.
it is and everything.
But yeah,
But it
I
is
mean,
an
it's,
interesting
it does tie into the cold. I'm like studying the Cold War for me is fascinating. Like the more left field stuff like this, and then also the history book stuff as well
Yeah.
is quite important as well. But yeah,
That-
there you go. That is our little insight into Kapustin Yar. We hope you learned something from that. It is deadly interesting.
It is.
Looking into Kapustin Yar, there's so much more to it. I mean,
Yeah, I kind of want to go back later on and look
yeah,
more
I mean,
into it.
obviously we only had half an hour to cover it, so I could only put so much in. But genuinely, I
If
was
you're
doing the
interested.
research. I was like, oh, I should have saved this for a full hour episode.
Yeah,
There's so much more to it than that.
but
Yeah.
if you are interested, obviously go look for yourselves. Go find things that you're interested about.
Yeah,
Come up
definitely.
with maybe I'd say come up with your own theories, but it's hard to come up with your own theories
Yeah.
about this one when there's such solid evidence. But
yeah, but
read about it if it
you've
interests
gotta
you. Go
start
for it.
somewhere.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah. So there you go. That is our stuff on Kapustin Yar. So part 2.
Yeah, let's head straight
let's
into
go for
it.
part 2. This is the secret Sphinx rooms as voted for by you on our Facebook page. This one resoundingly over the alleged murder of Alexander the Great in the poll. It won. I got over 80% of all the votes. It absolutely annihilated it. So there's a big interest
you guys
on this
definitely
one.
You guys definitely wanted to hear about this one.
Yeah, and I was doing the research before it. I was like, I'm kind of okay with the concept of this. Now by the end of it, I'm like, I am convinced. This is the first theory on the show that I'm like, I am absolutely 100% convinced that this is real. Honestly, don't hold me to it yet. Wait until we get to the end, and then you can hold me to it if you don't believe me.
Right,
So,
I'll let you start then.
Okay, so in recent years, our understood idea of evolution of human tech has changed greatly. Before, we thought our advancement was gradual and always moving forward. However, the discovery of ancient ruins such as the Göbekli Tepe, which is 11,600 years old, and the Gunung Padang, which is 22,000 years old, have shown it was likely the human race had to essentially start over after a huge brink apocalyptic event around 13,000 years ago, which coincidentally is when the last ice age ended. Yeah. However, any evidence that doesn't follow our textbook idea of history is basically thrown to one side and rejected by scholars. We'll look at this a bit more as we go into this theory. But there are rumours and theories that the Sphinx of Gaza may hold information from us that will completely rewrite our idea of human technology's origins and our advancement as a race, as well as how long we've actually existed as a race.
To be fair, you look back at some of the buildings, like the Sphinx and everything that's been made, and you kind of wonder.
Yeah, like there's the bit we're going to go on to next actually is about the disputes regarding how old the Sphinx actually is, because we don't officially know, but however scientific reports have been varying and they've evolved over time, and the ones we've got our hands on now, we're going to look at the theories now. So
this bit's covering a bit of the history to it. So the Sphinx was lost to the sands in the 1400s, and it was lost until the late 1700s. That's when it was rediscovered, when it was partially emerged from the sand that surrounded it. In 1858, early excavation was started and not finished. It wasn't until between 1925 and 1936 that the Sphinx was fully excavated and shown in its form it is in today. The Sphinx was, according to official studies, built around 2500 BC, so less than 5,000 years old.
Yeah, so the problem with that is, however, left field experts and scientists have estimated it to be 12,000 years old, built on what was at the time wet due to the end of the last ice age. Like you mentioned earlier, that was roughly when the ice age finished. But no one knows for sure exactly how old it is. The Sphinx also has signs of water erosion on the limestone body, continuing this idea, because of course it's in the middle of a desert. How does it get water erosion if it's only 2,500 years old? But if this date is true about it being 12,000 years old, then it would completely reshape our idea of human civilization development, and our history would need to be completely rewritten. Scientific bodies have actually accepted this research, it was groundbreaking when it was filed, and scientists actually went, yeah, this is true. It actually came from this year. And historians rejected this unanimously. They were horrified by the fact science had accepted this research. And so scientific bodies, like I said, accepted this research, and historians still reject it, despite the fact it's been scientifically backed, pardon me. But the age of the Sphinx is a story for another day. But the sheer size, age, positioning, and effort used to make this monument leads people to believe that it served an alternative purpose, or maybe it still does. There are no inscriptions on the Sphinx, which is really unusual for ancient Egypt. There's no names, there's no dates, messages, or markers. There's no hieroglyphics on there. Nothing. An Egyptian culture, as pharaohs, an Egyptian culture was very into the hieroglyphics and the etchings and carvings, as we've seen in temples. And the pharaohs would also like to flaunt their image and power by ensuring it was remembered on monuments and also in their tombs. But this leads people to believe that the Sphinx is actually hiding a deep secret quite literally a deep secret deep beneath it.
It would be.
Yeah.
So again, we have a couple of big questions about this conspiracy. So what is the purpose of the Sphinx? Is there a hidden room underneath it? What's in there? And why can't we have access?
If there's this big room underneath the Sphinx, why can't we just go and check, is the
Yeah.
example. But we'll go on to that. We'll go on to why that isn't feasible later. But for the time being, we're going to look at a man called Robert Schoch. It's not spelled shock, it's got a CH at the end as well. But so this is the man who initially challenged the historic conclusion that the Sphinx is only 4,500 years old, and founded the idea that it was much older, and found evidence to suggest this. Like, he found like the rain corrosion on the side of the Sphinx. And he also said that some of because the Sphinx has been like reconstructed and repaired over the years, some of the repairs are 2,500 years old themselves. So he said, like, why would you be repairing something you literally just built?
Yeah, it wouldn't be done.
No. Yeah, and his significance in the case becomes even more apparent when his research led to the theory that there is a hidden room underneath the Sphinx full of hidden historical knowledge that documents the secrets of Egyptian civilization. When looking at the minerals in the rocks to conclude that it was older than expected, he discovered an anomaly under the left paw of the Sphinx. This anomaly. Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, convinced Schoch that the left paw is artificially constructed cavity. Further analysis also suggested that there is something inside the left paw, so it isn't empty. During his brief period of access to the Sphinx in the early 90s, Schoch was able to run sonar scans of the bedrock surrounding the Sphinx, and was stunned to find that roughly 30 feet into the bedrock below the Sphinx was a square, clearly man-made cavity. However, as the Egyptian authorities discovered what they were doing, Schoch and his associates were thrown off of the site and banned from continuing their work. This, as a result, has fueled speculation that the Egyptian government is covering up knowledge of the room and already knows of its existence.
You wouldn't be kicked off and banned for doing something like that if they didn't know about it.
Yeah, why would you stop them if there was nothing to hide?
So there's obviously something important down there that they don't
and
want
also
people
the
to
fact
know.
that the left paw is a man-made cavity is the important part. I mean, it could be a natural cavity in the limestone, but it's not. He said
The way it's been
conducting
made.
via the sonar has clearly been sculpted.
So obviously there is theory stemming from this.
Yeah.
So people believe the Sphinx is guarding information in that hidden room that catalogues and narrates human behaviour for thousands of years. It's expected to contain records of these earlier civilizations that, according to theorists, exist over 13,000 years ago, before a huge event that essentially caused the human race to start from scratch.
Yeah. So this is we'll be going back onto this a bit later on, because this gets, like, the claims in this get bigger and bigger as we go on. This is what I love from a conspiracy theory. It starts with like a little small thing, like a little dense opening point, and then it just explodes into more.
I love it.
That's what I look for in a conspiracy theory. If it's got like that initial stinger, and then it just keeps drilling down and down and keeps going.
You know you've got a good one.
Yeah. So we're going to look at. We've only really got one, other than Schoch, of course. We've only got one historic figure to look at in this, and this is Solon. If you tuned in last week, you'll know that this is the Greek philosopher who's featured as part of our Atlantis episode, who was mentioned for eventually passing the story of the city through the generations down to Plato, who then included it in his work, which is now seen as historical evidence of Atlantis' existence. So that's where. So Solon is a familiar name for any of our regular listeners.
It is.
So when Solon visited Egypt, which is where he got the Atlantis story from, by the way, he met an Egyptian priest who asked him about the history of Greece. He quoted the beliefs of the Greek gods, saying that in the beginning man was created, then there was a great flood which caused the gods to recreate the human race. In response to this, the priest supposedly laughed in his face and said that the human race had actually been wiped out and regathered itself multiple times over the course of hundreds of thousands of years, following a string of disasters. He said the Greeks only remembered the first one, or the most recent one even at that point, because there had been many before that, but they only remember the most recent one, and he said that they lost all the records of older civilizations and that the Egyptians knew about them because they had the records. The theory is that these same documents still exist today in the so-called Hall of Records underneath the Sphinx. The priest... Oh, this is the interesting bit. This bit is really weird. The priest also said that... Also told Solon that the Sphinx was built by the, and I quote, the crocodile people.
What?
Yeah. Which
Okay,
is...
that is weird.
In the conspiracy field, they're also known as the Anunnaki.
Yeah.
These are apparently a reptilian-like alien race who visited Earth in ancient civilization and were worshipped like gods. An interesting side note to this is that the Egyptian god Sobek is depicted as a humanoid figure with the head of a crocodile.
That's so weird.
I know, it's crazy.
I mean, it links perfectly back to the last one, but
Yeah.
crocodile people?
Yeah, and the fact that Solon wrote this in his documentation at the time.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah, and apparently Solon was actually allowed to see these documents under the Sphinx.
Why didn't he re-record them?
Yeah,
that's my big question.
Yeah, that is a good question. But
If he was allowed access.
Maybe he wasn't permitted. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, it is absolutely fascinating. Of course, Solon lived from the years 640 to 560 BC. So we're still 2,500 years ago.
Yeah, that's a long time.
I mean, they were still there at the time, but I mean, the claim is that they had been there for at least 10,000 years before that. So they're probably fine if they're still there. But yeah, so again, we're going to look at why haven't we been allowed it, like we said earlier. If there is this huge wealth of history-bending knowledge, why can't we get it?
Yeah, it's covering the history of the human race. Why don't we have access to this?
Yeah.
So, if there is a big hall of records detailing a long history of human evidence, catastrophes, alien input into ancient civilization, and potentially advanced technology, then why haven't we been able to have it? Expert on the issue, Graham Sear, says that the Sphinx tests the soul before it can be embodied in the great knowing. He describes it as the watcher of the knowledge, and it tests you on your merit before you're allowed to enter. He argues that knowledge must remain dormant until we as a civilization are ready to see the universe differently. In other words, we are not worthy of the knowledge.
Yeah, which sounds a bit like it reminds me of the Holy Grail bit in Indiana Jones.
Yeah, it does. You must be worthy.
Yeah, but that's what it reminds me of. But yeah, basically we as a civilization aren't ready to know that.
Yeah. Also, as a less mystical reason for this is the fact that Egypt has been subject to political turmoil in recent years. For example, the rain removal and repercussions of President Morsi's time in charge. Egyptian officials do not permit any foreign investigations into the Sphinx, and excavation has been banned around it.
Yeah, again, that's like, of course, the first theory is like the big conspiracy part. The second part is a lot more practical. I would say, in terms of its
which is
in terms of its technicalities.
fair enough with all the political turmoil going on.
Yeah, there's it goes back a long time. I remember in sort of like 2005ish when there were still problems going on in Egypt. So we're looking at nearly 15 years of it now.
Yeah.
And there was I cannot remember for the life of me what his name was, but there was a famous American psychic who, this is where the name of the Hall of Records comes from. But he was a famous American psychic, and he said that he predicted that there was a Hall of Records underneath the Sphinx, and it would be unearthed in 1998. Obviously, it hasn't been, because this wouldn't be a conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
if
it wouldn't be a conspiracy if it had been.
Yeah, which is...
he might have just got his dates wrong.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he did predict it in the 1930s, so... But, I mean, even if you give or take 10 years, it still puts us at 2008, and it didn't happen then either. But, yeah, it is interesting looking at this. And, again, that thing with... the big part about this is, like, the room underneath the Sphinx, the bit with Solon, is the bit, for me, that really intrigues me. About sort of how this Egyptian priest had, first of all, given him the knowledge of Atlantis, which... coincidentally was estimated to be destroyed in the year 10,000 BC, which is, big shock, 12 to 13,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Which would coincide with this so-called apocalyptic event that happened 13,000 years ago, which wiped out our original human race.
Well, if you think about all the natural disasters we've had in the past, like the Ice Ages, it'd be understandable there being other, like, human civilizations that have been wiped out.
Yeah, definitely.
It
And
makes sense.
You think how old this planet is. This planet
Yeah.
is hundreds of millions of years, or maybe billions of years old. The idea that we've only had one apocalyptic disaster in that time seems ridiculous.
No, there would definitely be more than that, I
Yeah.
think.
And you think it's like you saw that there's the thing that if the world was a 24-hour clock, the human race would have existed for like 3 seconds or something, I think.
I think it's 4 seconds.
Four.
It's 4 seconds.
Yeah, but then that's based off the original theory. If we do find this so-called Hall of Records,
It could go back further.
yeah, it could go back much, much further. Like the claim from the Egyptian priest, who sadly Solon did not name. I wouldn't understand why he didn't name him, but I guess we'll never know that at this point.
I know.
Yeah,
I'd
but,
love to know
yeah.
the name of the guy.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to look into that. But yeah, the Egyptian priest gave him the story of Atlantis as one of those old civilizations. But he also said, here's the key quote for me, that humanity had to regather itself multiple times over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. So that goes against like the 10,000 year or the 13,000 year prophecy that human race has, like in its most intelligent civilized form, has existed hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
years. That sort of
It makes sense.
yeah, and you think like maybe that does apply to religions in some sense. Like you've got the idea of reincarnation in Hinduism and stuff, haven't
Yeah.
you? And Buddhism. Perhaps this is a form of that.
It could be.
Yeah, but yeah, it is. Yeah, it is so much.
I
that
mean,
you
on
could
a larger
speculate about
scale,
that. Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, much larger scale. And I mean, of course, going back to that, you've got the story of the Great Flood, which resembles Noah's Ark in a lot of ways as well,
Yeah.
which I noticed. But of course, in Noah's Ark, human race isn't annihilated in the
No,
way
it's
it is in Solon's story. But yeah, Solon is a incredibly interesting man,
He is.
or was, I should say. He's a
Well,
little bit
was.
dead now.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, only about 2,500 years of it. But
Mm.
yeah, he is fascinating. He lives until 80 as well.
That's
Really good
impressive.
considering the time. 80 is a good run these days, let alone 2,000 years ago.
I know.
Yeah. But yeah, he may be coming up again in future conspiracy theories. I'm not really sure. I wasn't expecting him to come up in this one, to be honest, until I did the research. And
Well,
then
if
it's all worked out really nicely
It
this week.
has.
Because you've got Kapustin Yar, which had the floor patterns, which
Yeah.
relate to ancient
The
Egypt, and
yeah.
then Solon in this one, who relates to last week's episode on Atlantis. It's all fitting together quite nicely. But yeah, next week might be a bit different because we've got different subjects for that.
Well, hopefully he comes up again.
Yeah, definitely. He's a very interesting man, as is Plato. And well, all of the people we cover are really interesting.
They are.
Otherwise, we wouldn't bother putting them in the show.
Yeah.
But
If
Solon.
they weren't interesting, I don't think we'd bother with the show, to be fair.
No, yeah, exactly.
the
yeah, the
part-
show,
it's the
the
people
show
that make
in
the
total,
show.
yeah, the show in its existence, we wouldn't bother if there were no good conspiracy theories. But yeah, there's so that's why we decided to cut the show in half each week, because there's too many to go through just an hour each. But anyway, we've gone off track a little bit
We
there.
have. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, we're gonna go for the big theory about the alien input. This is the massive input. So remember the Anunnaki, the so-called crocodile people, and Sobek, the Egyptian god. But keep that in mind for this next bit, because this is the theory we'll finish the show off for today, and it comes from an author called Sonia Grace. Now, Sonia specialises in spiritual history, and she suggests that the Sphinx was created in the form of a lion facing the Leo constellation because the aliens who built it are from that constellation. Here's the thing with the positioning of the Sphinx.
Yeah.
It is perfectly eastward. Perfect.
It'd be
and-
so hard
Yeah.
to be able to do that right.
Yeah, it is
without
not,
that
it is
technology
not
there.
a degree off of facing east. It's dead on. And the thing is, using computer technology, we can now wind back the map of the stars in the universe. When you map it back to 10,000 years ago, facing directly eastward in front of the Sphinx on the horizon, do you know what constellation it is?
Leo.
Yes. The Leo constellation is right in front of the Sphinx. So the Sphinx is essentially built facing itself in
That
the
is
cosmos.
cool.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
It is.
I mean, it'd be interesting to sort of the thing with the Leo constellation is it wasn't actually it wasn't referred to as the Leo constellation until the second millennium BC, which is 2000 BC. This is 12,000 BC. So we didn't really know of the Leo constellation at the time.
That is...
Which makes it even stranger.
It does.
Yeah, this is why I got so excited about this theory when I was researching it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely into this one.
She says the Sphinx was actually built long before the Egyptian gods arrived, and it was used as a transportation spot for those aliens so they knew where to go when travelling the solar system.
I mean that makes sense.
This bit is a lot more far-fetched, because the other one we can go like, it's definitely facing Leo. It definitely didn't know about the constellation at the time, and getting it perfectly eastward would have been near impossible with the technology they had at the time. Even carving the Sphinx would have been hard at the time, let alone like getting it to face direct eastward. It's stunning.
That'd be impossible. Well, I'd say it'd be impossible, but it's possible.
Yeah, but there's of course there's these theories, and then also the huge significance of this is like the positioning of the Sphinx is probably calculated so perfectly through mathematics and of course astronomy. These are viewed as the universal languages, because no matter what language you speak or where you come from, the sum of an equation can't change based off of that.
No, it's mathematical language is all the same no matter where you are in the world.
Definitely. And people sort of that this concept is broadened to the universe as a whole, and theorists think that aliens could be using mathematics to communicate with us. So in future, if aliens do reach out to us, the idea is that they would use mathematics, like the astronomy would be like a GPS, if you like.
Yeah.
Sort of like you are here, and then we can use the mathematics to communicate with them and find them there. Which is...
It is mind-boggling to think about.
This is like, there's so many levels to this idea. This is what I like. It starts off with the simple idea of there being like a room underneath the Sphinx, and then it becomes a man-made cavity, and then it's a hall of records, and then it's talking about a recycling of human civilization and existence. Then it's talking about aliens visiting Earth and being worshipped as gods, which then in place helps us build the Sphinx. It keeps going. Yeah. It is.
It's impressive. Okay, you definitely convinced me with this one, I've got to say.
Perfect.
Straight up.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, before I started the research on this, I was a skeptic, but now I'm like, I am 100% convinced there is a room underneath the Sphinx.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And it is definitely hiding something. I mean, why would you go through all the effort of building a Sphinx like that?
Not have something.
Yeah, with such effort and such precision, not to hold a purpose. And the other thing with the Sphinx is, because the Sphinx is the lion with the pharaoh's head, the pharaoh, it was originally a lion head to begin with. It was a statue of a lion.
Yeah.
The pharaoh's head wasn't on there. That was carved in afterwards, in around the year 2000 BC. But
which is fair enough to represent the pharaoh at the time.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, in Egyptian times, pharaohs like to assert their power by putting their faces on monuments and stone carvings, so they would be remembered for history.
They were very up themselves.
Yeah, and then of course their sarcophaguses and tombs were extraordinary. Like Tutankhamun, for example, is the most famous of the Egyptian pharaohs for his elaborate tomb.
Let's not forget Cleopatra. I think they're the two most well-known ones.
Yeah, the two most famous ancient Egyptian rulers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're some very famous Egyptian leaders indeed. And then but we've got to go back to the I'd like to quickly go back to the thing with Sobek.
No, go for it.
Yeah, the Egyptian goddess. This is like one of the more left field parts of this theory, but the more you evidence it to the later stuff in the show, like for example the Leo constellation and things like that, it's the so-called Anunnaki, who are not to be confused with anarchy.
The crocodile people.
Yeah. Yeah, the crocodile people of space who allegedly built the Sphinx. And I mean, of course there's no telling when this could have actually happened, but until we actually get to go in this room under the Sphinx, until we as a civilization are deemed worthy to access it, I mean, if it wasn't for the Egyptian government currently in place, I don't think there'd be anything stopping us from just like getting a pickaxe, knocking the foot open and having a look.
Would you want to though? Just straight up taking a pickaxe to it?
No, there's got to be a door.
I wouldn't want to damage it.
There's got to be a door somewhere, isn't there? Surely, or just drill down the side of it.
You wouldn't want to damage something like that.
No, you'd have
So
to
much
drill down the
history to
side
it,
of it,
yeah.
wouldn't you? And then
And
go
get
in
round,
that way.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's about 30 feet into the bedrock as well. So it's a long way down.
Yeah, it is.
Very hard to get to. And there's got to be like a secret door on the Sphinx or something, you would imagine, somewhere.
I think of
or at
all the
least- or at
tombs
least there
with the
used to
different
be.
secret ways, there's definitely some way of getting down there.
Yeah,
definitely.
or they used to be, at least, when it was
Yeah.
originally built. It may have seized up now or caved
I mean,
in.
if you think
yeah.
it was lost to the sand for a
like
long
400
time,
years it was gone.
if you think in all that time,
Yeah.
it might have been filled
And
up
on
and
top
no
of
way
that,
to
it's
get
had to deal with erosion for what is suggested to be 10,000 years, and 400 of which it was spent under sand. And it's been exposed to all sorts of desert storms and things
Since
like that.
then, yeah.
There is a lot to it. But that's the end of the show for this week.
It is.
It's gone quick again, isn't it?
It has, but it's been a fun one, definitely, and
Yeah,
I've
I've
definitely been convinced of this one.
Yeah, good. And next week our topics are going to be looking at, first of all, this is quite a recent one, is there's a place in China called Xinjiang, which is allegedly, it's basically a, I don't want to say the words concentration camp, because that sounds a little bit Nazi Germany, but it's
I
basically
mean, these things happen all over. It does happen in
Yeah.
other places as well. So
Yeah, I mean, it is, we'll say it's a detention camp, is the words we'll use in this. And it's allegedly, the BBC recently did a huge investigational piece on this, like massive. It's tens of pages long, loads of photography. It took months to make, and they had a whole team working on it. And the idea is that this place is where China is storing fugitives, and it is imprisoning Chinese Muslims there without trial. And it is
Jeez.
allegedly re-educating them. Is
Okay,
the
that's-
wording of that. We'll go into
yeah.
that as our
We will-
first one next week.
yeah, you'll find more about that next week. So make
Yeah.
sure to tune in and listen to us.
Yeah,
But-
and then the choice one is between the poisoning of Vladimir Litvinenko, who was a Russian KGB spy seeking refuge in the UK, who
Ooh.
then got poisoned 5 years after getting here. And the theory is like, why would Russia are the main suspects, obviously.
Obviously, yeah, definitely.
And people are saying, like, why would Russia carry out such a sensitive operation on international soil in a way that it could be traced back to them? Because they use a thing called polonium-210, which leaves a radiation trail.
Mm.
And then people were saying, why would they do that? And also, if it wasn't the Russians, then who was it?
Yeah.
Is the
we will
conspiracy
be,
for that?
which we might be covering depending on
Yeah.
which one you guys
Yeah,
vote.
and the other one is, I've forgotten his name.
I shall quickly find it on our
Yeah,
on
Gary
our Facebook.
McKinnon. That's it.
Yes.
Gary McKinnon is option B. He is allegedly a hacker from Scotland who did a hack of 60,000 military computers in America and allegedly found evidence that they are suppressing research into renewable energy sources, and also that the government knows of the existence of aliens and has documented it repeatedly through history. They're
So
what he
another
claims
one
he
that
found.
links to the aliens.
Yeah. Another one is linked in. Well, if it wins, it would have
If
linked
it
in quite
wins.
nicely. I mean, I think it's winning at the moment, but not to the point where it's a definite. It's in front, but it's not decisive.
There's been 31 votes so far,
Yeah.
but you guys have got another 4 days to
Mm.
vote and choose for which one you'd like to hear about. So
Mm.
let us know.
Yeah, you've got the Litvinenko poisoning or Gary McKinnon. They're both very interesting, so it's kind of hard to choose for me. But
But
yeah.
yes,
I mean,
that
I'd be
is-
happy with either one.
I would too.
I mean, I wouldn't put one forward if I didn't want to cover it, to be honest.
but
yeah.
yes, that was the
But-
show. Thank
Yeah,
you
that
guys
was the end
for
of the show. Thank
listening
you.
in.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back same time, same place next week
Yeah.
with 2 of those theories that
Yeah.
you just heard. And it will sure to be a great show. But until then, I've been Aaron Chandler,
I've been Abigail Murphy.
and this has been the Conspiracy Crunch. We'll see you soon.